Tyler Seguin's imminent return to the Dallas Stars lineup will mean massive things for their Stanley Cup playoff hopes. Let's talk about why. Alongside Craig Ludwig, I'm Owen Newkirk of the DLLS Stars Podcast. And Luddy, today we know that Tyler Seguin is getting closer. He's not there yet, but I thought it was very interesting that we heard on Wednesday of this week that Stars head coach Pete DeBoer, when he was on with the Hardline on the ticket, his sort of semi-weekly visit with them, he said that Seguin is ahead of schedule. That is really interesting because he was injured and they shut him down on December 1st. Then on the 5th, they announced that he was going to have surgery. And so here we are, not 4 to 6 months later, but a little less than that. And Seguin, although he hasn't just started doing the contact drills, he looks really, really good. And so, well, the open-ended target of return from Pete DeBoer and the Stars is not very finite. They're still keeping it kind of wide open. Probably not to put any specific pressure on Seguin's recovery. They sound very confident that he's going to play. So the question is, what does that mean for the Dallas Stars when Seguin does come back to this lineup?
Another bullet in your gun. I think that the most important part for Tyler in his coming back rehab process still hasn't happened yet, and that's the contact. And he'll get into some of that, in practices and things like that. And guys are leery about, hitting anybody that comes back from an injury, especially a Tyler Seguin. So he'll have to put himself in those situations. And I just think the good news for Tyler is he's been through something similar like this. So he knows his body. And, for a 33-year-old, and he's approaching, I think he's a dozen games short of 1,000, over 800 points. He's still a young player. I mean, he's not the 24-year-old, but when he plays out there, he plays with that enthusiasm. So, and I think that's going to be part of the reason that he gets back early is because he wants to be part of what this team is hoping for in the playoffs. He wants to be a big piece of that. And I do think that it's easier for Tyler to come back, and hopefully he joins that line of Duchesne and Marchment, but it's easier because they know what made the line work. He doesn't have to figure out where he is. It'll be interesting to see how many minutes he gets when he does get back in a game. Do they want to ease him in a little bit? I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about that. But I think there's an advantage because of all the success that they had as a line. They know where each other are, and they're going to be in the same spots. They're going to do the same things. Is Tyler going to be able to do it at the same pace he did before he went out? Maybe not right away, but I would expect that they can get up and get running fairly quick.
So some of the fancy stats, things like expected goals share and expected scoring at 5-on-5, they were in the high rates. This line, this Seguin, Marchment with Matt Duchesne in the middle, they were top 6 by those metrics as a line, and then they controlled a 90% share of the expected scoring. What does that mean? Well, what it means is they were really dynamic. You were talking about knowing where they are in the chemistry and understanding it. And at the trade deadline, when the Stars acquired Mikko Rantanen, we actually put together a little wish list line of a possible look for the Stars if with Rantanen in and then with Seguin coming back. Take a look if you are watching this with us. I will read it for the audio folks. Robertson, Hintz, and Rantanen is the number 1 line. But the line that was the number 1 group at the start of the year was Marchment, Duchesne, and Seguin. That pushes Mikael Granlund down to play with the red-hot Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn. And then take your pick, because we've got Dodonov, Steele, and Bork, but you could easily have Oscar Beck or Colin Blackwell in there as well. It's 5 players for the 3 spots on the 4th line. And Luds, with what we saw from Duchesne, Seguin, and Marchment at the beginning of the year, to me, as long as Tyler feels healthy physically, there's no doubt in my mind that the chemistry will return immediately.
Yeah, and I think it's the conditioning and being able to take a hit because, again, if you're an opposing player, you know what his injury is, and you're going to make it difficult on him. You're going to make it difficult on players. Other teams are going to make it difficult on Rupe and Robo and Rantanen for sure. So now, but what that does is it gives you balance, and you've got depth. And so when you go on the road, especially, and somebody wants to match up against, let's just say, the Hintz line, well, then if you get that chemistry back, now you kind of pick your poison. So that's in the perfect world, that's what happens. So I just think that I don't think we should sit out here and say Tyler's going to step back in and that chemistry from that line is just going to all of a sudden reappear. But I think it's going to come a lot quicker. And I know for sure those two guys, meaning Duchesne and Marchment, have been good, but they have been missing their buddy. And they've been trying to put different people there, but the line just didn't seem to click without Tyler with those two guys like it did before.
Beginning of the season, Seguin played in 19 games. He had 20 points, which was one of his best point per game averages in a decade, at 1.05 points per game. 9 goals, 11 assists. He was averaging 16 minutes and 13 seconds of ice time. He was plus 14. Just give it an idea for how effective that line was. Well, then you look at his playoff numbers. And this is where we go to of why is it so important to have Tyler Seguin back? Sure, it gives him balance and depth. It gives them that line back. But think about the experience. He's played 133 Stanley Cup playoff games over his NHL career. He has 71 points. He averages 17 minutes plus in the playoffs. And oh, by the way, he has a Stanley Cup victory. All those things matter once you get into the postseason.
Yeah, so you have that kind of experience. And Duchesne's got numbers, for playoff time. But you look at the other line with Rantanen up there. He's got those kind of numbers. He's probably got more games played, I would think, than Tyler does. So I think he's in the 180 or whatever it is. But regardless, now all of a sudden what you have, and then you've got Jamie Benn's playoff experience. So now you've got a lot of experience on your top 3 lines that have been in all these different situations. The other one guy that I think it's going to help a lot is Matt Duchesne. Even though he's been good without him, they have this way, and Matt Duchesne likes a certain area of the ice he likes to go into, and he gets in there. And Tyler is so good at reading off of Duchesne, and they create things together. These 3 guys have worked hard together, not just in games and practices, but at different times. They work on these things, and they have a game plan how they want to play. So by being able to insert an 80%, 85% Tyler Seguin into the lineup, it just brings the opponent and the coaching staff of other teams going, all right, well, now who are we taking tonight? Who are we taking away? Who do we want to keep away from who?
So Rantanen's only played in 81 games versus Seguin's 130.
Well, that's what he has,
but he has 101 points in 81 games. And it is, well, he's younger, right? He hasn't been in the league as long as Seguin. They both have a Stanley Cup championship, but it's for Rantanen, it's that points per game in the playoffs, which is obscenely high. And he plays 21 minutes on average in the postseason. That's the part, Luds, when you talk about matchups, I find very fascinating. You get Seguin back in the lineup because it's not just about which line another team's shutdown group is going against or their best defensive group, even if you're not calling it like a shutdown line, but who you're going to put your best guys out. It's also about not having to jumble stuff, because if you have 3 really dangerous lines, even if one line doesn't seem to have it that night in the playoffs, you've got 2 other lines that chances are going to play well. And so while the matchups might move around, you have, as you said before, lots of different bullets to use.
The other thing I would add to that, you don't worry about the fatigue level, because Pete DeBoer, with his coaching style, he rolls the 4 lines all year long. So they're only playing anywhere between 15 and 17 minutes. So where you're going to say you're playing against Colorado, and the McKinnons are going to play a lot more minutes. They don't have that. Well, they're a little different now with what they did down the middle. So that may help those guys. But I think for this team and the way that they can allocate minutes, because Pete trusts all 4 lines, they all have their role, and nobody wants to stay out there longer than anybody else. They're willing to share that. And then also, again, the other thing it's going to do, it's going to prop up your power play units. Anytime you can put a Tyler Seguin out there, you got another weapon on the power play.
So as you formulate everything, the Stars get that guy back. We already did a segment about Miro Heiskanen and what he does. The Dallas Stars could really load up for the Stanley Cup playoffs and get everybody healthy. The last thought, though, is, Luds, let's go back to the preference of veterans, what they want to do when they play preseason games. Not many players want to play a ton of preseason games. Why? Risk of injury. It's nothing on the line. Well, in this case, the Stars do have a chance to maybe win the President's Trophy, amazingly enough. So there is something on the line, but I don't think Tyler's going to want to or need to play 5, 6, 7 games. We're probably, with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, looking at maybe 1 or 2 games, probably at the most, of him playing if he can get back before the playoffs begin.
And I think the only reason for that is his own personal confidence, to know that when he gets in against a regular opponent, that he can go down the walls, he can go to the front of the net, and he can take that hit, and he can battle in corners, and he's got that acceleration that he needs, and also the stop and starting. You know, I mean, again, when you're having your hips done, those are a lot of that is what he's already figuring out now that he's skating and things like that. But to be able to do it in traffic, it makes a big difference for him.
So the question for you guys is, how excited are you to see a healthy Tyler Seguin join this already high-flying offensive group as they hit the Stanley Cup playoffs?